God, it's really weird trying to do an introduction for yourself. So I guess I'll just get on with it. But yeah, welcome to the stage, Joe. Okay. I have to find my. Here it is. How do I? Play. There you go. I don't know where to stand. So this is what happens when nobody volunteers to do a talk. You get given a talk on version control. So I hope you're all happy, and I hope next month I get lots more volunteers. Next in August. So anyway, no. Hopefully it will be a bit more interesting than that. Although it is, obviously a bit technical. Git for game devs. All the things you didn't want to know about version control. So just to give an introduction to myself, because if you're doing a talk, you're supposed to introduce yourself, and also some of you may not know me, so maybe you don't know exactly kind of my background or what I do apart from kind of organising this. But I am the founder and lead programmer and sole employee of Hairy Heart Games, which is so I'm a freelance Unity developer. I'm a programmer, and I've been doing that for about 8 years. I've been sort of programming for a bit longer than that. I've got a nice set of, come in, don't worry, it's fine. Nice collection of logos for clients and things that I've worked for, so that you can all be satisfied that I'm a professional and I know what I'm doing. So, what is a version? So here, I've been writing a story. I've been reading a lot of fairy tales recently, so this was my first draft. But I thought it wasn't quite right, so I wanted to make some changes. So I've got my version 2. I think it's pretty much done now, but I don't know. Maybe there'll be some more revisions, we'll see. But this is kind of how software like Git or other version control software kind of sees your changes. You've got changes in green, you've got deletions in red, you've got additions. It stores all of the changes from each version to each version. And for Git, that's like how it stores it internally, which is a more efficient way rather than storing a new version of every file. What is control? Well, there was a video game, but there's other meanings of the word. And in this context, what can you do with version control? You can go back in time to previous versions of your files. You can. Sorry. I wish I could. I forgot to say something in my first slide. I wish I could go back in time. Damn it. But anyway, I've lost the moment now. So you can combine work from many people. That's like the main thing that I think a lot of people want to use version control for, so they can collaborate with people, especially if you're not sitting in the same building. You can't sort of like swap USB sticks. And you can experiment. You can break things. If you have version control like Git set up, you can feel free to basically trash the project. You can delete files. You can create new ones, and you can be confident that you can always go back to the changes you had before, the version you had before, and you're not going to ruin the project for the other people working with you. You're not going to, ruin everything. You can also back up your work. It means if there's a fire or if someone breaks in and steals your hard drives, you're not going to be too much in trouble. There's some amazing story about the development of one of the Toy Story films, I think, where they apparently lost, there was a big fire or something, and all the computers were burnt down, and they had lost all the copies of this film they'd been working on for 2 years. Then, but luckily someone had a computer at home with all the files on, and this was kind of before, I think, you had widespread kind of backups and stuff in place. I mean, that's a bit different with a film because they're dealing with different files and different volumes, but like it's the same. You hear all these, you do hear horror stories of people who, their whole project goes up in flames and they've got no way to get it back. So it's important. And you can track down bugs, which is something that is a bit less common perhaps. But like if you've got a build of your game and you've got people reporting bugs, and you can see this bug appeared in version 63, you can go back and look, see what were the changes in that build from the previous one that might have caused this bug. And there's loads of other things you can do too. So it's not, it's a multi-purpose tool. And I think that's the kind of interesting thing is it's like another piece of software that is worth learning to use, I think, because it has like so many uses. It's not just something you have to use because the programmers are getting on at you. It should be something that you should want to use. I think you can make your life easier. What is a Git? This guy. This is like the humour in the talk. This is Linus Torvalds, who invented Git, and he also invented the Linux operating system. He's like a very techie, smart guy, but apparently he's also a bit of a, abrasive, sort of not a really nice guy at times. And I think someone called him a Git, and he, being Norwegian, he was like, "That's a funny word. I'm going to use that and name my software after it." Help! It's broken. So, as the kind of programmer on the project, I've quite often had to sort of like talk to people who are new to version control and Git specifically, and try and help them sort their problems out. Whether it's an artist or someone who's just come into programming or to game development, or someone from a different industry, maybe from film or animation or whatever. And there's always a moment where frequently you get a panicked message on Slack or an email saying, I've broken everything, I've messed up the whole project, and it's all ruined. And I think that's happened a few times to me, and my sort of like advice from it, and I've been sort of using Git now for 15 years or whatever, and my experience is that it's not broken. Calm down, relax, breathe out. It's a very robust piece of software, really, and it's definitely possible to get it into a funny state. And it can be kind of unintuitive sometimes how to get it back to the state that you want, or to understand what state it's in. But it's actually quite hard to really damage things irreparably. There are version control systems that do let you damage things irreparably in quite an easy way, and I learned that on one of my first jobs, where they used a version control system called CVS, which nobody uses anymore because it's terrible, except for this one company in London that I worked for, apparently. But anyway, and everyone was mad at me, and they had to spend the whole team of 15 people had to spend a week fixing it, and it was awful. But with Git, generally, it's not. It's usually recoverable. Speak to other people on the team. But my advice would be, if you're in a situation and you're trying to figure it out, and you think everything's a bit wrong, and you're not sure what to do, don't force it. So there's quite a few commands in Git, or options often if you're using a GUI, and it will have a tick box saying force. Don't do that. Don't do that until you really understand what that button is doing, because that's the key thing that terminology uses to say you're going to do something that might damage stuff. So even if you read it on Stack Overflow, or even if ChatGPT told you to do it, don't do it. Speak to someone who knows. But yeah, don't panic. It's probably fine. I did this diagram myself. Thanks very much. Not just a programmer.
What version is it?
Version 2. You can see I made some changes out there. So this, I wasn't sure what to title this slide, but it's kind of supposed to give me a chance to talk about one of the things which a lot of people coming to Git struggle with a little bit, especially if they've used other version control systems like SVN maybe, or Perforce, or so cool. Those are sort of centralized systems. Git is a decentralized one, but in practice you don't need to worry about that kind of terminology too much. But what it kind of means is that you have the server. This is the server. This is GitHub or GitLab or whatever, wherever your code is being hosted externally, and you have your computer, which is. But those both contain Git repositories. Git repository is all of your changes, all of your files from the whole project, back until the start of the project usually. But the server and your computer are basically equivalent in the sense that they both have the same kind of information on, or they might have slightly different sets of it, but essentially they're sort of equal in the way the system works. And so what happens is usually when you're making your changes, the speech bubble. That's thought bubble. These are your sort of like working changes. You know, you've drawn a mustache on the character, you've just like added a new fart sound effect to the project or whatever, you've done some programming. Those changes you've saved and they're on your computer in your working directory, but they're not kind of currently in your local Git repository. So that's what you have to do. First, you have to take your changes and kind of like commit them, which is the terminology Git uses, to your local log of history. And then you have to push them to the remote server so that everyone else can get them back. So just a nice illustration of that two-step, thing. Oh no, watch out. Boring stuff coming up. Sorry. I wanted to include some sort of like more specific bits because I think it's useful, but sometimes it could be a bit boring, so I don't know. Git was designed for text. Originally, like it was invented for the Linux operating system, which is all C files and loads of text and stuff. So it doesn't deal that well with images and 3D models and sound effects and stuff, audio files. So we have this thing called, so the main problem with those files is that those changes like we saw on the first page where you're just changing one word or whatever, that system doesn't really work for images, for audio files. So it would have to store a whole new version every time, a whole new copy of the file, which very quickly can become really enormous and take up all the space on your computer or on your repository. So we have this kind of add-on called LFS, large file storage, which takes all those big files and stores them somewhere else. So it can be kind of anywhere, like Amazon servers or Dropbox or whatever. But usually it's going to be with the same provider, so you don't have to worry too much about that. But it does mean that in your Git repository, sometimes you might do a fresh pull, do a fresh like clone of the repository. If you haven't got all the right boxes ticked, you might see some of those files with like audio files or 3D models or whatever. Instead of the actual file being there, it'll just be a tiny file with like a long string of numbers and letters. And that can obviously cause problems for your game if it's the wrong, if it's not the real file. So just something to be aware of, really. If you're setting up a new project, go and look up LFS, see how to configure it. Most of the time, you can just tick an option, in GitHub or whatever to get that set up. And if you're joining a project where they use it and you're having problems because the files kind of aren't there or they look like they may be corrupted, then that's like a good port of call to have a look at it. But the only kind of caveat is maybe if you're like offline. A neat thing about Git is because you've got that local history, you can kind of go back through all your old versions, even if you don't have the internet. But with LFS, they're all online, so you can't do that. Or at least the files that are in that. Git ignore. This is the really good bit. Git ignore. This is like a file that tells Git which files it should ignore, not put into source control. So this is like an example for Unity, where you sort of thing you might have. You're saying like the temp file, the logs file, the builds folder. And for Unity, that library folder is an important one to not having source control because it's all these folders and files are generated in the process of making a game, but they're not. I guess they're not the things that people are creating. They're usually the end result of some build process or some like automated thing. And so you don't really care about giving copies of those to all your other people or keeping track of those because they're just going to be regenerated by Unity or by Visual Studio or whatever it is. The builds folder is there. Maybe not obvious, but you probably shouldn't put your builds in Unity, in Git, in source control. Generally, people don't do that. I don't know. Yeah, I probably wouldn't. Don't do that. Jumping time, intermission. We got through that bit. It was a bit boring, wasn't it? So trumpet time. I was gonna put this video at the start in the About Me section, but I thought I'd save it for here, so we had a nice little break from all the technical stuff. So this is a trailer, not finished yet, for my new upcoming game, which is called, well, you'll find out, I guess. I won't spoil it, so you can enjoy this for a couple of minutes. Oh, have we got sound? Oh no, we don't have sound. How do I do sound? Just have to do it like that, I suppose. Should we see if this works? Thanks. Yeah. So the game's called Rally Ali Ali. The trailer is almost finished. There's a few more edits. I'm not making it though, but we've just got to finish the game really now. So that's the hard part. Anyway, back to the boring stuff. Oh man, why did I do a talk on Git? It's so dumb. Unity YAML merge. No, the reason I did was because I think I meet so many people and they're like, oh, Git, oh, it's awful, oh. And I kind of wanted to just try and change that a little bit, or at least give people a bit of a place to start so it doesn't seem so confusing. Unity YAML merge. If you're using Unity, I just Google this, look it up, pop it into your source, your Git client, and it's amazing. Like if you're working with Unity and you've got people working on different scenes, you always end up with these weird conflicts, and they're very hard to resolve usually. Git does a really bad job of merging those files, the different versions of a scene file or a prefab file. But Unity have provided this tool, which is not always very easy to find, but it kind of does a much better job of basically taking the two versions and making a new one which works and kind of contains all the right stuff. So, top tip for you. Git providers, you can put Git anywhere. It's very kind of agnostic about like where you're storing your files really. There's some like big providers you maybe have heard of. GitHub is like probably the most famous. It's fine. I've used that on a lot of projects. It can be a bit expensive, especially if you have a lot of collaborators or I think they've changed that. They're always changing their pricing models. These sort of Silicon Valley companies, aren't they? They're like trying to juice you in different ways that you can't really, you're not really sure how it works, but I think they've changed their model so they're billing for bandwidth or something now, but it can be a bit expensive, so worth sort of shopping around. GitLab is pretty similar. Like it probably looks almost exactly the same, but they have a different pricing model. But it's pretty good. I've used that too. Bitbucket again, it was fine. They're all kind of fairly similar, so you can sort of have a look, see which one you prefer. If you're somebody who likes to get into the command line a bit more, or has like a server of your own, a VPS or something, Git is a good one to look at. That's like self-hosted, so potentially it costs you nothing but your time and maybe whatever you're paying for a server already. You can store your files on Dropbox, and there's articles on this, and apparently it works. You can store your files on your own. You can, as I was saying before, Git is like a distributed thing, so you can have a Git repository that's not synced to a server. And it's still quite useful to be able to go back to older versions, but then you can link to, ones on different file systems. So if you've got like a NAS or like a network storage box somewhere, you can put files there on a Git thing and sync it, and it works fine. It supports that all sort of like just as well as it does GitHub or anything like that. And so if you've got some old computer sitting around, some Minecraft server that you don't use anymore, you can stick it on there. I work with a company who've got a dozen sort of like published titles, fairly well known indie game studio. Big. One of their games is really a puzzle game done really well on the App Store. And I was fixing some problems with their database server and found all of their Git repositories for the whole company were just sitting in the home directory of this random database server on Amazon. I was really surprised that they weren't using something like GitHub or whatever. But yeah, you can do it any way you like. I wouldn't recommend the database sort of random database server thing though. Git clients. There's loads of different Git clients you can use. I've just written one here because I think all the others are a bit rubbish. And I've used a bunch of them, and a lot of them are quite confusing. There's one called Fork. It's a bit annoying because it's quite hard to Google because it's like quite a common name, I guess. But it's free. It's kind of like Nagware. If you don't pay for it, they'll pop up a message every so often, like Unrar, WinRAR, whatever. But you can pay, I think, £50 or something for a lifetime license. So, but it's really good, and everyone I know seems to use it and recommend it. So I definitely just recommend that. And that's the end. We did it. Yay. Thanks. I'm happy to take questions, but I also understand if you don't have any. So, oh, got a question.
So, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but specifically, why would you recommend choosing Git over Perforce or SVN?
Yeah, good question. I mean, so for me personally, it's like the the price and the sort of accessibility of it. Yeah, I mean, SVN's maybe not too bad because you can definitely kind of install that yourself and do all those things. I'm a bit technical, and I had a server, and I sort of wanted to be able to do that stuff. And I guess I came from a sort of programming background where Git was really just the sort of standard as well. But yeah, compared to like Perforce, you definitely have a lot more options in terms of who's hosting your files, so you can sort of shop around and get it relatively inexpensively. Whereas obviously with Perforce, you have to deal with Perforce, the company, and it can be kind of expensive, I think. But yeah, I don't know. It's not 100% considered. I think SVN could be interesting. I've hardly used it, and it seems like it could be a good fit for games development. So I'd be interested to know if anyone out there is in here rather is using it and would recommend it. Yeah.